Yo, what is going on? It's Tuesday and we're back with Small Ball for another action-packed show. It's been a couple of days since the last show. We had the weekend to sit and watch and read some baseball news and such. Let's get right down to it. There's some hockey I want to watch tonight. There's a basketball game or two that I might pop in. So let's get rolling. We got a lot to talk about today. And I want to start off this Astros stuff is really going to keep popping up as we go. I mean, it's something we're probably going to be talking about for quite some time. But something that I want to talk about today is there's been some stuff floating around about comparing sort of what happened with the cheating scandal to the steroid era and how it's sort of similar and different or better or worse for the game, for the fans, for the players. And this is something that I've kind of thought about for a long time. And I wasn't around in the steroid era. That was primarily in the 90s, and I wasn't born yet. I was born in the year 2000. But, you know, I've read up a little bit about some of the stuff that went on and all that, and basically the main point that I have been talking about for years, and I'm really trying to get across, is that I'm not so sure the steroid era is in fact over. When you think about, so a lot of people have been sort of critical of Major League Baseball's reaction to the Astros scandal. A lot of people feeling that they're covering stuff up and what have you. And it's possible. I don't know. I don't have the facts of the investigation and all that. And hopefully they're doing their best to carry out the appropriate punishment. But it's of course possible that they want to minimize the damage on the game. And that is what it is. But in terms of the steroid era was a big positive actually for baseball in the early stages of it, and then it became a big detriment, as we know. And I think that it sort of elevated the casual fan for a short period of time and diminished the excitement for the hardcore, more diehard baseball fans. And I think something like that is in danger following this particular scandal that just occurred in 2017. But in terms of the steroid era, I want you to think about this for a second. The idea and the sentiment is that if a player takes performance-enhancing substances, or a banned substance, they are doing such illegally against the rules, and they will be punished for doing so, right? Which is, of course, how it should go if you do something that is against the rules, and not only against the rules, but puts your own health in jeopardy, and in a lot of cases forces a lot of players into doing and making similar mistakes, right? And that's kind of what happened in the 90s, where the average player was losing their jobs because the barometer for power and such was elevated because of the cheating and those substances, and a lot of people were forced to make a decision between their health and their career. So when you really think about it, I don't see really a downside. So from the perspective of a player, let's say I'm a player that has the idea I'm gonna take a performance enhancing substance. I really don't see a lot of downside in that, in the framework of what Major League Baseball has done over the last 20 to 30 years in terms of steroids. And let me explain what I mean by that. And obviously there's the health factor which is, of course, important to just about every player and person. But in terms of their professional baseball career, historically, taking a banned substance has been very beneficial for players. Financially, statistically, and there really isn't a huge risk factor in doing so. I mean, Alex Rodriguez, right? I like A-Rod. I thought he was given a very harsh rap. I think that, what he did was, of course, wrong, but I think it was blown out of proportion immensely. But he was really given 3 chances, right? And he's going to go down as one of the greatest players to play this game. And I'm sure, he says that he was naive, and maybe it's true that if he did know better, he wouldn't have done so. But it seems to me as though the decision to take a banned substance or multiple banned substances was very beneficial for his career, for his financial status, and whether or not he's a Hall of Famer, I mean, that's in question, but he hit 696 home runs and is going to go down as one of the greatest players to play this game. And from a financial standpoint, players will get suspended without pay, right? And typically these players, the instances that we talk about are the A-Rods, right? Are the big name, the Ryan Brahms, the big name players. But the instances that I'm worried about, that I'm focused on, are the players on rookie or minimum deals, right? And they're suspended without pay for a season or whatever it is. And they lose $1 million, maybe less. But when they come back, it doesn't seem like the teams that are in the market for them as a free agent are deterred at all by them being suspended. And they come back and they get a long-term extension as though nothing happened, right? So, and it's a difficult thing because there isn't a lot of evidence behind, the risk-reward of taking a banned substance, because personally, I'm guessing that Major League Baseball is covering this stuff up, right? And even if they're not, and they're really just negligent about it, because I really do think there are a lot of players taking banned substances, some unknowingly, but most knowingly, and whether or not Major League Baseball is negligent or they're covering it up, they're not suspending a lot of players for doing this. And there are instances where they are. And that's what is kind of that's what bothers me the most, is because Major League Baseball, in my opinion, is using the suspension process to make it seem to the casual fan, and they've fooled a lot of hardcore baseball fans as well, that they care a lot about keeping performance-enhancing substances out of our game. Right? So they'll suspend a player for 80 games for taking a banned substance. Or they'll suspend, A-Rod and make a complete mockery of his career and just publicly destroy, his entire self-worth, really. I mean, and that he became the poster child for the end of the steroid era. What baseball wanted to really bring it to an end. And they said, we're going to make A-Rod our target. And to the fans, we see his career being, sort of jeopardized and his image being compromised. And to us as fans, it's very easy to say players going forward are going to be a little bit more conscious about that. But when you think about it, especially on the lower levels, I'll take Melky Cabrera as an example. Melky Cabrera bounced around from team to team. He was a marginally productive player for the Yankees and the Royals, and he ended up taking a performance-enhancing substance. And he gets suspended, he gets caught, he had a breakout season. All of a sudden, Melky Cabrera, where did he come from, right? Turns out he was taking a performance-enhancing substance. What a surprise. comes back, and he gets a $42 million contract. The largest annual salary he had had to that point was just over $1 million. So financially it worked out. It kept him in the game for probably another 5 to 7 years because he was a much more productive player after his suspension than he was the year before his breakout season when he was caught taking performance-enhancing substance. So from the player's perspective, there's really not a lot of risk factor, in my opinion. Right? And think about it from baseball's perspective. Let's take a pessimistic, cynical view for a second. What is baseball trying to do right now from an image standpoint? What are they trying to put forth as their product? They want power. They want home runs. They want pitchers throwing in the triple digits. Now, steroids, of course, help with those things. So does launch angle and, velocity mechanics and all that, and that's the cover-up. Major League Baseball is showing us exit velocity and launch angle and velocity and pitching efficiency. I think, and pitchers are throwing harder than they ever have, hitters are hitting the ball harder than they ever have. And the training has a lot to do with that. But I think there are way more steroids and other performance-enhancing substances in our game. I mean, every second baseman, every starting second baseman, you can't start in this league anymore at any position if you're not hitting 15 to 20 home runs. I mean, you're thought of as a liability offensively if you're not putting up definitely double-digit numbers. And contending teams want their second basemen and catchers and every position to get up close to 20 home runs. And you're not going to be pitching at the top end of a rotation or late in ball games out of the bullpen if you're not sitting 97, 98, maybe even 99. And pitcher after pitcher is coming into this league throwing 100. Whether they're good or not, that's one thing. But it seems impossible to me that steroids leave and power and velocity goes up. So, I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with the training. I think a lot of it has to do with mechanical efficiency and all that. And players are stronger than they've ever been. But we supposedly take steroids out of the equation, and as soon as we do that, the power numbers skyrocket. That doesn't make logical sense to me. And maybe Major League Baseball is covering it up, but let's say you ask Major League Baseball, if we could have steroids in the game and nobody know about it, do you think they would say, no, we don't want that? Because that's going to add power, it's going to add home runs, which they want, it's going to add velocity, and we'll get to that another day, because I personally don't think this power revolution is great for the game and the fan base and the ratings. I think it's artificial what's happening, and I think over time, I think they're going to lose a lot of really passionate baseball fans. I think they're even starting to do that. But I'm going to stay with steroids for a second because we have a lot to get to. But yeah, I think it was Alex Wood the other day said I'd rather face a hitter on steroids than a hitter that knows the science. But steroids are a completely different issue. I mean, you're talking about players' health, and it seems really difficult to believe to me with the seemingly, I mean, it seems beneficial for players to take these substances. So, and they make, so like D. Gordon, for example, was suspended for a performance-enhancing substance. So everybody in the media and in the fan base, oh, it's not just power guys. They're really suspending everybody who's on these substances. It's not just A-Rod. It's not just Ryan Braun. If D. Gordon can get suspended, that means nobody is safe. That means everybody that's going to take steroids is going to get caught. Or Major League Baseball wanted to diversify their suspensions and make that the image. When in reality, D. Gordon gets suspended, and other guys like him are doing the same thing. And I mean, let's just say, for example, baseball was 50%, maybe more. Like, I'm just going to 50%. Let's just say 50% of the players are taking performance-enhancing substances, which I have no idea whether that's true or not. If Major League Baseball had to suspend all of those players, there would be no game. It would become AAA. So if that's the case, Major League Baseball can't really do anything about it. And it seems like it's beneficial for players to do that. So I don't see why that wouldn't be the case. So what do we do about that? I have no idea, and I have no idea if that's even going to come to light or if it's even true, because there's no evidence around it. Like this cheating scandal, there's evidence. And Major League Baseball put out punishments to prevent people from doing it in the future. With steroids, there's likely people doing these things that we don't know about, and there's no evidence. So it makes it really difficult to analyze just how rampant this is. So that's just something to think about. And I think it affects college baseball. I think it affects high school baseball, and maybe even below that. But I don't think that the steroid era is over. And that's not to say that it's better than it was. And there was a period in time when it was kind of almost encouraged for a couple of years there in the 90s. But I really don't think the days of steroids are over at all. And again, there are players getting suspended every once in a while to try to prove that point. I think that Major League Baseball, wants its fans to think that they want this stuff out of the game, and why would they? I mean, if you think about it. So let's switch gears for a sec. So when you think about these scandals, right, the steroid era and the cheating scandal, the Black Sox scandal back in 1919. The Black Sox scandal really almost ended the game of professional baseball. And without, I think, Babe Ruth, and maybe others, but a large chunk, 90% of it was Babe Ruth, we might not have professional baseball in America today. Because the ratings were absolutely destroyed after the Black Sox gambling scandal in 1919. And Babe Ruth was sort of he made up for all the ratings that they lost, and after he took over the league and made baseball fun again, it became America's national pastime. And I really think that one player, one person, had that big of an impact on the game, and I'm not sure if we would have professional baseball in America if it wasn't for Babe Ruth. So it took a generational talent, more than a generational talent. He's the best baseball player in the history of the game, professional baseball, to sort of bring baseball up from where it was, which was a terrible place. Ratings were absolutely awful after the scandal, and I don't think the same is going to happen here after following the Astros scandal, but it's definitely not going to help, that's for sure. And so I thought about that for a second, and I was like, if this scandal has a really, really big impact on the fan base, and despite all the efforts that baseball is trying to bring it back to being America's national pastime, and it's clearly the tertiary sport behind football and basketball in America, and let's just say baseball takes a tumble. I think it would take a similar situation where you need a face of the game, a generational talent and person, and Babe Ruth became an American icon, not only in sports, but as a celebrity. So I thought about that, and I came up with a top 5 players that could really act as that face of the game. If baseball took a turn for the worst, who could have that much of an impact, not only on the field, but of baseball's culture, right? There are certain people that transcend stats and transcend what they were able to do on the field, right? I think Babe Ruth was beyond a talented player. He had a huge impact on the culture of baseball in America. Jackie Robinson changed the game of baseball and really the world. Ichiro Suzuki, I think, also had a similar, not as impactful presence, but very, very impactful presence on not only the game of baseball, but the world. And it's players like that are it's beyond what they're able to do on the field. So I'm going to give you my top 5 players, and there's probably more that have the opportunity to do something like this. But if we needed it, who could be that guy that baseball turns to bring the fan base back? So let's go. I'm going to start from 5. And you'll notice it is not the 5 most talented baseball players in the league. But here we go. Number 5, I have Pete Alonso of the New York Mets. So Pete Alonso is a great player. I think he is a slightly overrated player, as you know. But right now he plays in New York. Big market. Plays for the Mets. Small market. But let's think about this for a second. If baseball needed a jumpstart of the fan base, who would we target? We target the young fans. Because the old fans, for the most part, are going to remain loyal to the game. That's what they love. That's what they grew up with. Old baseball fans are going to watch baseball. What baseball's trying to do now, I think a little bit the wrong way, is target the young fans. Pete Alonso is a young player who's going to be around, hopefully, for 15 to 20 years in this league. That's kind of probably what he has his sights set on right now. And he plays for the New York Mets. If Pete Alonso, because right now he led the league in home runs, he's everything that baseball wants baseball to be right now. Rookie of the, I mean, he seems like he is on track to contend for the Hall of Fame. I mean, obviously it's early, but he's had a better start than just about everyone in this league. If he is able to bring the Mets, who have been an absolute disaster for 50 years, at least, to relevance again, if they could win a World Series, but maybe not even go that far, the Mets sort of, to me, represent the young fan base. Because you got the Yankees in New York. Old school, long, great history, right? Classy organization, by the book, very in line and very mild-mannered, championships and all that. And then the Mets are like their younger brother. Losing, not great ownership, no superstar, Hall of Fame. I mean, no superstar sort of Mets icon kind of players of note. They don't have Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig and Joe DiMaggio and Mickey Mantle. We get all that. If Pete Alonso is able to, on the field but also off the field, I think he's one of the best candidates for the face of a franchise kind of a player. I mean, he's mild-mannered. He seems like a great guy, right? He's a lovable kind of a player. He's very, very he's a likable person and player. I mean, he hits home runs. He's, very respectful of the game and his fellow players and all that, from what we understand. And if he can be the face of a Mets team that returns to relevance for the first time, 2015, you could say they were relevant, of course, because they were in the World Series, but it was such a short period of time that nobody really, historically is going to remember that. So really, to me, return them to relevance for the first time since 1986. I think that if he can sort of change that would really change the shape of the game. If the Mets, who've historically been a disaster, are led by this one guy who everybody likes and is producing on the field, return them to relevance, I think that can have a really big impact on the young fan base, which is what it's going to take to jumpstart the fan base at large. Now, he's not quite, number one on this list because I don't think he is going to be a Hall of Fame talent. I don't think the Mets are going to return to relevance. But if he's able to show me more than I have, he's got to make a little more contact. He's got to play a little better defense. He's okay. But he's got to get some more hits. And the Mets got to build a team around him. And it's not only on him, but if he's able to do that, I think that could be a pretty strong influence on the game. Number 4, Michael Nelson Trout. You might think he's a little bit low on this list. I'm going to explain why he's only 4. He has to be on this list because he's the best player in the game, and he's the only player. I take that back. He's the best position player in the game. He's the only player in the league today who is a lock for the Hall of Fame and is also in or close to their prime. I think Miguel Cabrera is a Hall of Famer. Albert Pujols is for sure a Hall of Famer. Clayton Kershaw will probably be a Hall of Famer. Pitchers are kind of a different story, though. Because pitchers, and I forgot to sort of mention this, but pitchers have a really difficult time being the face of the league because they only play once every 5 days. Starting pitchers, that is. Right? So if you go to see the Lakers play, you're going to see LeBron James. If you go to see, the Chiefs play the next 10 years, you're going to see Patrick Mahomes. If you go to see the Dodgers play, there's a 20% chance. Obviously, you can craft your schedule around this, but on average, there's a 20% chance that you're going to see Clayton Kershaw pitch. All right? So it's really difficult for pitchers to be the face of the league. So all the players on this list, spoiler alert, are position players. Mike Trout's the best position player in the league, and he's the only one that's a lock for the Hall of Fame that's in or close to his prime. I think he's exiting his prime, but still very, very close. And he still has a lot of time to show us some stuff. And somebody that talented and that accomplished, which he will be by the end of his career, it's a sight to behold. Everybody loves watching greatness, whether they love to love it or they love to hate it. Everybody likes watching Tom Brady play. Whether they're rooting for him or not, it's good for the ratings. LeBron James, same story. They represent greatness, and Mike Trout represents greatness. There's nobody in the league that, by the end of their career, if everything goes according to plan, is going to be as accomplished as Mike Trout. With that said, as much of an impact as that can have on the game, because greatness to me is one of the most important things in terms of a fan base. Babe Ruth was great, and people wanted to watch Babe Ruth play. People want to watch Mike Trout play. The only thing about it is he plays in LA, but he's in the secondary market in LA, the Angels, and he's going to be there for the rest of his career. Just signed a huge extension. So, and the Angels historically have been very meh to me, right? They're obviously not the Dodgers in terms of a brand. They're sometimes good, sometimes not good, but that's not really relevant in the sense of a culture. I mean, they're kind of like the Clippers. They're exactly like the Clippers in terms of their brand, right? So it's going to be really difficult for him to, and he's not an outspoken guy, right? So and it's not even about being outspoken. He's very mild-mannered, which I'm not knocking at all. That's one of my favorite things about him. But he's not that interesting to watch, as great as he is. I think the ratio of talent to entertainment is pretty low with Mike Trout, because he's a great player, but there are players that I'd rather watch than Mike Trout. Because he doesn't really do anything amazing. That's just takes your breath away. He does everything really, really, really well. But he doesn't have the power of Babe Ruth. He doesn't have the speed of Billy Hamilton. He's close in both of those things. He doesn't have the defense of Ozzie Smith. He's close, really close in all those things, but there's nothing where you just say, wow. You say wow about his entire career and his entire makeup as a player, but that's not really something you're going to go to the ballpark to see, more so than some of these other players on this list. With that said, of course he has to be on this list because greatness, like I said, that's what helped. That's kind of what brought the fan base back with Babe Ruth. But he's not that outspoken. He plays for the Angels. He's going to be there for the rest of his career. So if you think about it, it's not like in basketball, LeBron and Kevin Durant have changed the shape of the league just based on their free agency decisions. Mike Trout's not going to be able to do that because he just signed an extension for the rest of his career, essentially. So that's why he's 4 to me. Number 3, Mookie Betts. There was a period in time, it was about 2 years ago, that I thought Mookie Betts was a better player than Mike Trout. I still think they're very close. Mike Trout, the sentiment with Mike Trout is that he's far and away the best player in the league. It's not close. I think Mookie Betts is close. Mike Trout's a better player. Mookie Betts is a better defender. He hits for contact better. He runs the bases and runs better. He stays healthier for the most part than Mike Trout. He doesn't quite have the power. He's a better arm. I think Mike Trout's a better player. Mookie Betts is really close. So he's a great player. Not only is he a great player, but he's going to be a free agent next year, which sort of brings back into play the LeBron, Kevin Durant sort of instance, where he's going to be able to choose, and he's not, from what we understand, interested in an extension with Boston, right? So he's going to be able to choose, like Harper and Machado, where he wants to go. And that could have a really big impact on the league if he goes to a Dodgers. Or if the Yankees move some things around and he ends up on the Yankees. Or if the Astros make a push for him and they sort of reestablish their brand and move on from this cheating scandal. Whatever the case may be, he's not in that situation of Mike Trout where he's locked on the Angels for the next 10 years, at least. He's going to be able to decide wherever he wants to go and whatever market he wants to play in. Maybe it's a small market that he actually turns around and makes relevant. Maybe he goes to the Twins. I mean, we don't know. Not that the Twins are a tiny market. But I think that makes him a little bit more marketable than Mike Trout because he's going to have the ability to choose where he wants to play. And maybe he doesn't even sign a huge long-term extension and he plays for 2 or 3 teams going forward and for the rest of his career. Or maybe he stays in Boston. I don't know. But he's an extremely good player. He's more fun to watch than Mike Trout. He's more dynamic. He's a better defender. He just does things that wow me a little bit more than Mike Trout. And I know that might be a weird thing to hear, but I think he's the best outfielder in the league. I really do. I think he's the best defensive outfielder in the league. I mean, he put up 420 putouts as a right fielder. Granted, Fenway Park is pretty big in right field. In 2017. So he has center field numbers in right field and assists out the building. I mean, he has a rocket arm. He can hit. he's really a five-tool player, obviously. And he's going to be more marketable because he's a little bit more dynamic. He's a little bit, he's a little bit more entertaining. And he's going to be able to choose where he wants to play. And I think there's something to be said for that. And depending on what market, needs it the most, I think that he's going to have a pretty big impact. Number 2 is Javier Baez. So, Javier Baez is a great player. He's not Mookie Betts. He's not Mike Trout. I'd take him over Pete Alonso, but it's close. But Javier Baez has become sort of the poster child for this let the kids play, exciting, flashy movement that baseball is trying to establish. We saw it in the World Baseball Classic, where he was the leader of that Puerto Rico team that was so much fun to watch. And he's just an emotional guy who's fun to watch. And to me, look, I've been very critical of flashy players, bat flipping, and all this stuff that I think really distracts fans from the game, which is what we want to see. We want to see great baseball being played. And in a case like Jose Bautista, I think he's a very talented player that I'd like to watch a lot. But I get distracted by some of his antics. And, we remember from Game 5 against the Rays, we remember the bat flip. We don't remember the home run as much as the bat flip. So it distracts us and the great game that was played. A lot of people do remember it, but everybody remembers the bat flip. So it distracts us from the game itself. With that said, I think Javier Baez does it in a very respectful, enthusiastic versus sort of obnoxious way. I don't think he's obnoxious about it at all. If there's anybody who I'm okay with being flashy and very passionate on the field, it's him, because I think it's really rooted in his enthusiasm for the game and his enthusiasm in his team. And I think that he's a very productive player who's a great leader. And I think, so as much as I think that this kids movement, let the kids play movement, is actually hurting the game a little bit, and we'll talk about that another time, I think he can actually be a guy that makes it work. And so whether I'm right about that or not, I think if it's not working, he can sort of make it a fun game that people can sort of look at Javier Baez. He's the show cover athlete this year. He's a very marketable player just because he's so much. He's entertainment. Every time we watch him play, and he's getting better and better as a player. So that's even more of a reason to watch him play. But he's flashy, he's passionate, he's exciting to watch, and if he keeps playing at a really super high level, maybe he ends up leaving the Cubs at some point. He's a really marketable player that can be the face of a new era of baseball. And he's not the best player in the league, but he brings excitement to the ballpark. And I watch Cubs games to watch Anthony Rizzo and Javier Baez. I think Anthony Rizzo is exciting to me in a very different way. But Javier Baez is super fun to watch. And I'm going to watch the World Baseball Classic in a couple of years, and I'm really excited for that. And part of the reason is because of Javier Baez. So he brings excitement to the game on an international level. He's actually the only international player on this list now that I think about it. And he's just a super talent, and he's super fun to watch, and that's very marketable. And number 1, the most marketable player to me in the league right now is Aaron Judge. And no, he's not the best player. I would obviously take Mike Trout over him. I would obviously take Mookie Betts over him. As a talent, I'd probably take Javier Baez over him too. And there are other players that I would have as well, of course. But let's get this straight. Aaron Judge plays for the New York Yankees. He is a young player who's going to be around for a while. It seems like the kind of guy that would stay. So he has the opportunity to be a Yankee lifer. And we've seen what those kind of guys have, been able to do to the baseball culture and history over time. Right? Who are the most celebrated, most popular players over the course of history? Babe Ruth, Joe DiMaggio, Mickey Mantle. There's others, of course. Derek Jeter now, Mariano Rivera. We get all that. But to me, he represents super power, obviously. And he, back in his 2017 season, he's doing it less and less. You could not look away from the TV when he was up at the plate. It was just so much fun to watch. He was hitting big home runs, long home runs. And from that perspective, that standpoint of this power revolution, he's the perfect guy for it. Because he is a home run derby every game. He has the opportunity to hit one as far as we've ever seen. And he's a super, super leader and amazing in interviews. He's just a super marketable player. And he sort of has that Pete Alonso factor. He plays in New York. He's great with the New York media. He's so likable. He's a great player and not to mention the Yankees are going to win some championships in the next couple of years, it seems. So he's going to have that going for him. If I think about the face of the league over the next 5 to 10 years, I would guess it's going to be Aaron Judge. And I don't think he's going to be the best player in the sport over the next 5 to 10 years. But the Yankees, paired with his talent, paired with the teams that they're going to have, paired with the excitement level that he brings to the ballpark. I live in New York, and I go to a lot of Yankee games. I'm a Yankee fan. When you step into Yankee Stadium, you feel Aaron Judge's presence. Literally, I could walk in at 5 o'clock. The game's going to start in 2 hours, and immediately I'm excited to see Aaron Judge play because everyone's wearing a 99 jersey. There's the Judge's chambers in right field. There's posters. You walk by a gift shop and it's Judge, 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 Judge. And that's not to say they don't have other great marketable players on their team, but there's something about him that's just so interesting to me and exciting. And I'm a Yankee fan, but you don't even have to be a Yankee fan or even a baseball fan to enjoy watching this kid play. So to me, impeccable personality, super leader. He's going to be the face of the Yankees for one of the best teams that we've seen them have in quite some time. He's going to win championships in all likelihood. He's going to hit for power, which is what Major League Baseball wants to promote. He's got to make a lot more contact and he's got to stay healthy. But to me, this is the face of the league over the next 10 years. And he has a lot of similarities with Babe Ruth. Super power, plays for the Yankees, super likable. And if Major League Baseball needs to turn to someone, I would pick him to be the face of the league. Because he's the face of the biggest franchise in the history of professional sports, and he's a great player, and he's a super likable guy. So to me, it's got to be Aaron Judge. It really does. He's the player that I have the most fun watching. Been a little disappointed over the last couple of years with his, not always staying healthy and production's, up and down. But to me, if I had to take a bet on jersey sales over the next 10 years, I think he'll top the list. So that's my top 5 for you guys. And I want to move on. But that was fun. I kind of like that. That was cool. Because, I'm always very interested in sort of the culture dynamic and different teams and players. Baseball is a very team-oriented sport. I mean, players run the league in the NBA, but in baseball, you really have to have a strong sort of brand and culture, and it's the same thing in football. Like, there's a reason why we see the same teams winning Super Bowls and World Series. It's very difficult for a team to win the World Series with a bad culture, right? So it's kind of like how I feel about the Mets this year. I think they have a pretty good amount of talent, but I don't trust their front office, and I just don't trust them to get back to the postseason. So it's very interesting to me, all that stuff. But I want to move on. Deep breath. I got very passionate about that. So there was a story I read yesterday. By the way, Hall of Fame stuff came out tonight. I'm going to talk about that tomorrow. I want to give that a day to sort of unpack and all that. So we're not going to be talking about Hall of Fame stuff today. There was a story I read yesterday about Nolan Arenado. And he said he felt disrespected by the Rockies organization because they were listening to trades for him in the offseason. And they just said that they're going to hold on to him at least until the season starts, and maybe if things go poorly, at the deadline, he'll be on the move. But when I read, he talked a little bit about it to the media. He didn't give a lot of specifics at all, and he seemed, and admittedly was, very unhappy with the sentiment that they were trading him. We're trying to, at least. And to me, I really think I'm on the Rockies' side here. I have no sympathy for Nolan Arenado. There's a lot of reasons. Let me lay them out for you. Number one, no player is untouchable. Like I like to say, and all the people that know me know that I like to say this a little bit too much and it annoys them, but there's a price for everyone. If I'm the Angels, I'd trade Mike Trout if I got the right pieces for it, obviously. I mean, there's always a deal that can be put in place that would be beneficial for your team, no matter who the player is. Of course, that's number one. So Nolan Arenado has to understand that. He has to understand that the Rockies organization has been disappointing over the last couple of years, has had a ridiculous amount of talent, especially offensively, and they haven't produced. He has to understand that he is not he is, first of all, I'm going to get to that in a second. So he has to understand that he is not untouchable, that he is touchable. Number two, I'm not sure why he would even think about himself as an untouchable player, because he's a great player, but he is very replaceable. He's a very replaceable player. I don't think there are a lot of players that are better than him, but let's get down to some numbers for a second. And we all know the Rockies' inflated offensive stats, and we all understand that. But when it comes into play, we kind of forget about it, and we don't really understand it to its fullest. So if Nolan Arenado was traded, because that's how we have to look at it. We have to look at the value that they could get for him, right? So if they traded Nolan Arenado to another team, depending on where he went, if he went to the AL, he would play maybe 3 games at Coors Field over the next 5 years. If he went to an NL team, he'd play a couple more. But for the most part, he wouldn't be playing his games at Coors Field, as we know. And his stats over his career away from Coors Field, I'm going to read them. He's played 516 games on the road in his career. He's a .265 hitter with a .323 on-base percentage, .476 slugging percentage. That's a .799 OPS with 98 home runs and 288 RBIs. So if he wasn't on the Rockies, in all likelihood, that's the player that we would be getting. .265, .799 OPS, 288 RBIs in 516 games. At home, he hits 324, a 995 OPS, 129 home runs, and 446 RBIs in 515 games. So he's played one more game on the road than he has at home. So basically the same. At home, he has 446 RBIs. On the road, he has 288. That's in large part to the offensive success that everybody else on his team has. So if he is on another team in another ballpark, that's the player we're looking at. This past season, 277, 866 OPS, 20 home runs, 48 RBIs on the road. And I think he's as good as they get, maybe outside of Matt Chapman defensively at third base. But to me, hearing him talk about himself as a player and the disrespect that he felt in them trying to trade him, first of all, he has to understand that everybody is tradable. That's number one. And second of all, to think that he is in that category of a Mike Trout or a Mookie Betts, who's actually in trade talks right now, he's completely off base. Because if he's on a different team, like think about that. He's a 265 hitter when he doesn't play in Coors Field. So if he gets traded to an American League team, he's a 265 career hitter. That's very tradable to me. I would trade a guy who hits 265 for the right price. Definitely would not consider him untouchable. A 265 career hitter with a 799 OPS. So that's my... I mean, it's a bad look, too. I mean, there's varying opinions on the level of production that he'd give you if he didn't play for the Rockies, and now this makes him seem like a self-first kind of guy. There have been various instances where he's not really looked to me like a great leader. He's had fights in the dugout. He's criticized pitch calling from the catchers and the pitchers, and now this, and he's a 265 hitter away from Coors Field. So there's a lot of people that have sort of sympathy for him, and it's like, how could you disrespect the face of your franchise? But he's very replaceable to me. I mean, think about it. Let's say you took another 265 hitter. Pete Alonso hit exactly 265 last year, if I'm not mistaken. Put him in Coors Field. All of a sudden, he hits 324 on the road. That's what, or at home rather. That's what Nolan Arenado has done over his career. 351 in Coors Field last year. He had a 1,057 OPS. Take Pete Alonso, put him in Coors Field. That shows you how replaceable Nolan Arenado is. There are a lot of 265 hitters that you probably never even heard of. That's how replaceable Nolan Arenado is. So the fact that he thinks of himself as untouchable and disrespected by these trade talks, that doesn't make me as a GM, let's say, want to go out and get him. So that's my take on that. I want to move on. Similar topic, but I'm going to wrap up with this. I want to talk about JT Realmuto for a second. And this is kind of going to be difficult for me to explain, but I think he's underrated. Now, he's very highly thought of as a baseball player, plays the most important position on the field at a very high level. He hits better than just about every person that plays that position, if not every. And he recently came to Philadelphia. And look, JT Realmuto, to me, and the reason why I'm even bringing him up is I was thinking about Harper deal, Machado deal, the Trout deal, Betts contract that he's going to get next year. And I was thinking to myself and wondering why JT Realmuto, because I know that isn't going to get the same financial respect of those kind of guys. Because if I'm building a team, I'm obviously looking for a catcher. That's the most important position on the field. That's what's going to provide the most value if you get a great catcher. And he is a great catcher. I'm going to read some stats. First of all, he hits 275. That's what he hit last year. He hit for an 820 OPS, 25 home runs, 83 RBIs. So it's, and the for a catcher thing, right? Hits for a catcher, or you have a guy hitting 240, and that's okay for a catcher or good for a catcher. That only applies if you're a good catcher, by the way, because otherwise you can stick a third baseman behind the plate hitting 240 and say that he's good for a catcher. That only applies if you're producing on the defensive side of the ball. So that's one thing. And he is really producing on the defensive side of the ball, which I'm going to get to. But in 145 games, which, is the whole season for a catcher. Catchers don't play every game. But he played 145 games, so he stayed healthy, and he had 123 strikeouts. So he's getting hits, he's hitting for power, 25 home runs, 83 runs batted, and he's knocking them in, and he only had 123 strikeouts. So he's putting the ball in play. He threw out 47% of would-be base stealers last year, 43 for 92. That is absolutely ridiculous. And he had 30 wild pitches in 145 games, which is also ridiculous. Gary Sanchez had the same number of wild pitches, and we'll get to Gary Sanchez down the road, I'm sure. Very critical of him as a defender and an all-around player, as many of you know. He had the same number of wild pitches in 50 less games. So he's absolutely incredible on the defensive side. And he's the most productive hitter at his position, at the most important position on the field. If I'm building a team, I'm taking him over, probably not over a Mike Trout. I'd probably take Mookie Betts over him. But, Pete Alonso, I'm taking Real Muto. Like a Javier Baez, I'm taking Real Muto. I'd take him over Christian Yelich. I really think he's undervalued as a piece to your team. And it's unfortunate that the Phillies are kind of disjointed right now. You saw my prediction video. I think they have a lot of talent, and actually more talent than a lot of teams that might actually finish better than them just because of their schedule, because they're playing in a really tough division and they're kind of disjointed, and new manager coming in, good manager, but new manager. And I think that JT Realmuto, should be financially respected. I think he's worth $30 million a year. I really do. So I'm not really sure why I decided to bring this up, but I was just kind of thinking about it when I was talking about some of the Betts stuff and the Trout stuff, and just thinking about contracts, and I was just like, JT Realmuto to me seems like it seems like people's view on him is kind of like a really good player that, he's a good the best catcher, the best at his position. But let's not forget how important the catching position is. To me, he's a elite player that can change the shape of a franchise, and there are not many players that you can say that about. And he's the best catcher, and just based on that, I put him in the top 5 of. Honestly, if you think about the best baseball players in the league, what does that mean? That means the players that contribute the most to a team. I think he's in the top 5. I really do. And he doesn't have quite the offensive numbers as some of those guys, but think about what he does defensively. I think for catchers, I think defense is more important than offense, to be perfectly honest. And there's no other position that even comes close. But what he's able to do, with that pitching staff, and he can hit as well. I really think he's undervalued. That's all I got today for you guys. Tomorrow we'll get into some Hall of Fame stuff. We got a lot to talk about with that, and some current players that may or may not get into Cooperstown at some point. We're going to talk about all that stuff. But thanks so much for watching today. I hope you enjoyed. Got some. We talked about some steroids, which was always fun. We talked about some the top 5 most, essentially the top 5 most marketable players in the league, but the top 5 players that could rejuvenate the fan base if need be. Talked about some Nolan Arenado, talked about some JT Realmuto, and that's all I got for you guys today for this Tuesday edition of Small Ball. So thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't, and let your friends and family know if you think they'd be interested in checking out the show. So thank you so much again for watching, and I will see you guys tomorrow. So peace.